followed briskly tomorrow by All Saints Day, which we will be happy to see coming along. Maybe they'll change the weather if we're nice enough to. Today we're hearing from George Weller, who is a neighbor of ours in Stansted, a local American by origin. He has a fairly eclectic background, starting off in chemistry and physics, going to accounting studies in the U.S. mostly. He has worked in business and for a number of years, and has also been, as he says here, an inventor, an organic farmer, a builder, a pilot, and a person who is interested in things. After a certain stint in business, he decided to go back to the land, which is where he is now. And as you can see from the topic, one of the things that he's interested in is how we come to think about the things that we think about, and I'll let him get right into it. George.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
It's turned on? Okay. Okay, these were some things that are kind of a bit of a synopsis of what I'm going to be talking about. And anyway, this whole project started. You want to flip the next? Oh, I'm doing the flipping. Okay, here, flip. Okay, the whole thing started when I went to the Fairbanks Museum in St. Johnsbury and talked with Steve Molesky, and he said, George, did you ever read a book, Noah's Flood? And I said, oh. I didn't say, oh, but I thought, you know, a religious book, you know, Noah's Flood, Bible, all that, you know, it's probably fantasy. He said, no, this is a scientific study. These universe, and I have two copies, so I can pass one around if anybody wants to look at the copy. He said that Columbia University Lamont Geophysical Observatory researchers took an ocean-going ship and drilled core samples in the world's oceans to determine what the sediment layers were like over time. And they went over into the Black Sea as one of their parts, and they found that the Black Sea changed from freshwater organisms to saltwater organisms roughly in the year 5,550 BC, over a minuscule time period of 2 years. And that 5,550 is plus or minus 10 years, as best they can be stated. So anyway, I started to wonder some of these questions. Well, like, where's the Black Sea? And how big is it? And why is it an unusual flood? Was there a Garden of Eden or something in advanced culture developed around the unique body? Did Noah have anything to do with it? And why is it a unique story? And what evidence do we have? So anyway, how big is the Black Sea to start with? Anybody have any idea? I mean, say compared with New England. How big is the Black Sea?
It's the size of France.
The Black Sea is more than twice the size of all of New England. It's larger than the state of California by about 20%. Okay. The book, I guess I'm going to read this. The book dated 1998, Noah's Flood. This is a picture of, I guess I have a picture of it on here. Okay. Describes the research vessel, the Glomar Challenger, and they did drilled core samples in the ocean, in the world's ocean, and anyway, I told you about that. And this is a picture of the boat. No, this is a picture of the boat. This is a picture of the Black Sea. Now in the Black Sea, it's important to notice the Black Sea, in parts of it, is about 1.5 miles deep. That's the dark area. But the light area is not too deep. It's very kind of shallow, actually. And the water that flooded in came through here, through this Bosphorus, right there. It flooded from the world's oceans, connected into the Black Sea, which at that time was a freshwater lake, a huge freshwater lake. Okay. So, they did a bunch of core samples. They correlated them all. The same strata stopped exactly at that 5,550. So you had how many core samples? They all agreed that there was a big change at that point in time. Okay, the next here. Analysis of the core samples collaborate to show that as the last ice age retreated, starting about 11,000 BC. Oops. Reverse. Okay, so there's the ice age, and ice and melting and coming down through Russia and Europe, and the Black Sea is really right here, but this is, at that time, was a little bigger. So a lot of water going in there, all fresh. And so that went on from about 10,000 BC down to the 5,550 BC. And at that time, the world's oceans got high enough so that it would back flood without any hesitation, because it's the oceans around the world, back flooding into the freshwater lake. And as I told you, the lake was pretty big, 350 miles by 1,000 miles, something like that in size. And so all of that flooding over a 2-year period caused all of the people who were living around there to skedaddle or die, drown. Now then, the flooding, Dr. Ryan, who I've been in contact with several times, he sent me this picture of their analysis of the fan of water in the valleys that it made falling down the 300 to 350 to 500 feet down into the freshwater lake. So you all know basically what's happened here, right? There was a huge flood. It flooded a big area, and a lot of people moved. And so before this, between 10,000 and between 10,000 BC and 5,500 BC, agriculture developed there, and things were pretty nice there compared with other parts of the world. Agriculture only developed in 2 places in the world, basically. I'll read this here. Because of this unique, huge, and abundant freshwater supply, human societies, at least 5, developed around its shores. People developed agriculture, especially grain crops, a real Garden of Eden in this area, in this very dry area. David Harris, director of the Institute of Archaeology, University of London, England, believes, quote, agriculture originated independently only very rarely, possibly twice, in the history of Eurasia, first in the Near East and later in China. Ukraine is still a huge grain producer. That's the area to the north of the Black Sea. Other regions such as Oceania and North and South America contributed little to the development of civilization. But over thousands of years, the huge freshwater lake evaporated down to about 500 feet below the ridge that was the phosphorus there. This went down about 500 feet below this dam wall, that 20-mile-long dam wall. And during those thousands of years, agriculture developed. And things were pretty happy for most people there. Okay, a little bit about Black Sea. It's the world's largest and deepest body of water, regulated by rivers and connected to an ocean. To compare, all of New England is almost well, and I showed you the fair of pulling in, and that's here. Okay, and I mentioned about agriculture. The Black Sea is a giant body of fresh water in an arid region, led to agriculture developing, where it had for about 4,500 years, from the end of the last ice age, 10,000 BC to 3,500 BC. And the fertile land was exposed as rivers from the northern glaciers slowed down and water evaporated, so that's how the water level got down. And the flooding in 5550 BC changed the water from fresh to salt over a 2-year period, putting all that farmed land and communities underwater and changing local life forever. Farming activities had to move uphill by many miles onto new ground. Once fresh, abundant water, 350 miles wide, was gone. This was true especially in the south side of this freshwater ocean, because there weren't any rivers coming in really into the Black Sea from the south, only from the north. And the flood led to a major diaspora, I guess that's how you pronounce it, diaspora. What? Diaspora. Yeah, diaspora. A migration away from the area, and that's what this is showing. Okay. Many of those people that migrated away from this terrible disaster, so you can see in the image there's 6 groups that migrated away from the Black Sea flood area. 2 north and west, and 4 south and east. William Ryan sent me a copy of a 2015 paper, Study of the Potential Relations of Bulgarians with Different Nations Living in Iran. And it shows many similar toponyms, study of place names, between Bulgaria and Iran. So between Bulgaria over there and Iran down here. You guys know where those places are? No. I don't trip there. Bulgaria is over here. Iran is down over here. Okay. As an example, this infers the people who migrated away took their old place names with them. For example, in the state of Maine, there's a Moscow, a China, and a Paris, and like back in Europe. There's also in Vermont, there's Montpelier, like in France, Troy, Albany, etc. Okay. So names people kind of tend to take with them sometimes when they move. Okay, so anybody here for the Byzantine calendar? Well, anyway, let me tell you. The flooding in 5550 BC is an interesting date, as the Byzantine calendar shows year 1 of creation as September 1st, 5509 BC. This is about 40 years after the estimated date of the flood. Now, the date of the flood also has a leeway of 10 years. Yeah. So it's almost identical in geologic time. So what's this square rock? It's the King's List. And kings list. It's a Sumerian kings list. It lists the kings and the lengths of rule. And there's two groups of them, one before a big flood and one after a big flood. And for some reason, the kings before the big flood could live hundreds or thousands of years. The ones after the flood only lived a normal lifespan like we have. I don't know why. Maybe somebody does. Also, the foundation of the world is a phrase used in the Bible also. I guess it occurs in New Testament, Matthew 25:34, Luke 11:50, Hebrews 4:3, and 9:26, and Revelations 13:8 and 17:8. So there's a flood story, a beginning of the world, creation of the world, and these things all seem to correlate to this flood. So, in that Sumerian kings list, they have all these kings like I said, and then the words say, then the flood swept over. Those are the words that are, if you can read that, are on there. Okay. Another flood reference occurs in clay tablets. When George Smith put fragments together of a Babylonian clay tablet containing Assyrian inscriptions, he found remarkably on piece K63 the description of a great flood and the supplying of a ship with food, treasures, seeds, animals, and children of all the craftsmen. I guess that's enough. I can read. And then let's see, where's the next one? Yeah, this is part of the translation there. All those kings. Bunch of kings. And so, like I said, this bunch of kings ruled for 221,200 years, which is just a little bit unusual. So, we have recorded information from the Byzantine calendar and the Bible, and the clay tablets, all stating a year of creation, and all related to the date of this flood. Could this flood have buried? No, here comes really interesting. Okay, no words I said. Okay, hold on. My connections and speculations really seem to get wild. Everybody holding on?
Yeah.
Could this flood have buried what? Atlantis. The fabled story of Atlantis. Could this flood have buried Atlantis communities underwater and led to the myth of its sinking? When it was actually an island society in a shallow part of the Black Sea that got flooded when the water level rose about 500 feet over 2 years. Archaeological digs referenced in the book indicate advanced societies appearing almost instantly in neighboring areas. Instantly geographical time, geologic time. In other words, they dig up stuff, they find pottery and shards and other stuff, and they see what it looks like and say, oh, well, this is part of this era and this is part of that era. And this is like advanced beyond what's normal. Okay. So, in summary, there are indications that it is the forced exodus of more advanced peoples from a grand melting pot in the wake of a great flood that gave the culture of old Europe its thrust into the New Age. Those are the words of in the book here. I think it's probably the authors. So what do we know about Atlantis? Well, Wikipedia is not always the most reliable source. The following is probably okay. Atlantis, The land is like a mighty, okay, the information that we have about Atlantis comes from the Greek, from specifically Critias, is that how you pronounce his name? Critias. One of Plato's late dialogues. It recounts the story of the mighty island kingdom. So I actually found this dialogue. I've got it back in here. It's cut short, but anyway, we'll go into that more later. But the story concludes with Atlantis falling out of favor with the deities and submerging into the ocean. Now, all of the theories and stories of Atlantis I ever heard were Atlantis, due to an earthquake or a volcano or whatever, the ground went down and Atlantis sank. But it's possible, according to this research, that Atlantis did not sink, but it got buried in water from the flood. And the air, well, okay. So just think about that concept. Do you want me to read any of the bits about the Greek talking about Atlantis? Okay. No.
Show us the picture of the island first.
You want to see that?
Yes.
Coming up. Let me. This is Google Earth, as focused as I can get, which is it's pretty clever. This is an actual picture of the island.
That used to be underwater.
That is still above water.
Oh, so the rest of it, I see.
Yeah.
That part of it.
This part is still above
So
water.
there was still a part that was exposed, even after the flood waters rose.
Just 1 second. Thank you for asking questions too. And feel free to interrupt me and ask questions. Okay. This little island, if it's pronounced Zimini, is right there. And like in the thing, I'm curious George, okay? So I wondered if there were advanced civilizations that had to move away from the flood, then, and there was an Atlantis maybe, because Atlantis was supposed to be sophisticated, more advanced and all that. So if so, where would this place be in the Black Sea? Because this is the area that got flooded. And we know that agriculture's developed there. We know that things are going pretty good there. So where could this be? So I looked at the Black Sea in Google Earth, and I moved around, and found a little teeny dot. I said, focused on that, and that's that island right there. And what's of interest to this dot here, this is the island. This is the delta area from the Danube River. I think it's the Danube, big river. And there was a much, much bigger river during the flooding of the melting of the glaciers. And it's only 12 miles offshore. 12 or 20, I don't remember exactly. I probably wrote it down.
I think it was 25.
Okay. So, as I mentioned, this is a really, John, my computer geek son, who actually drew the arrow around here, or the yellow line. This area could have been Atlantis, and that would have been the only mountain in Atlantis, and the only thing that's still stuck out of the water. Okay, so I went through all that. Okay, so now I need to go back. Okay, thanks. I have peripheral neuropathy, so I have trouble keeping my balance. so I have to be careful. Anyway, I'll just read this. As the ice sheets melted, a huge valley filled with fresh water slowly evaporated below the Bosphorus, and the fertile ground produced good grain crops and maybe a society called Atlantis, or we call Atlantis now. Maybe. This is fantasy. I mean, this is speculation. The flood was fact. So, it was enough. The fertile ground produced good crops of various kinds, especially grains. Like I said, grains were developed there. It was enough food that inhabitants did not have to move around pursuing game anymore. Was this transition from mobile hunters to fixed location gatherers the basis of the Garden of Eden story? Over the years, people have discovered that they could improve grains they ate by keeping and sowing the best grains and improving the grain streams. You did not have to keep moving around after wild animals, but you could live growing food in your own area. This also probably was the beginning of property ownership. Before this, people were in mobile societies. You chased after game, you moved around according to how the weather was treating you, the food supply was there or not. Now you could stay in one place and you could grow your own stuff. And after you made a bunch of improvements in your food supply, you really wouldn't want others to come along and take your food. So you need to establish some systems and some like fences and stuff or perimeter boundaries for you or your group. Okay. Also, with Adam and Eve, apples were originally developed near Iran and over the other side, south and east of here. So now then, this is, did I show you this one? I think I did. And that one, and that one. Okay, now then, there were many gods in the time before the flood. And now there's gods of earth, wind, fire, water, fertility, etc., etc., etc. So, when you're chased by water or die for 2 years, one god becomes more important than the other ones. And this was the god of water at that time. However, now these are my speculations. However, over 2,000 years, the god of water, as a monotheistic god, one god of water, became just one god over 2 years of the story being told. And so now then you have going from polytheism to monotheism. And this is kind of unique in the world. The Middle East is the only place this has happened. So, Zoroastrian was a religion in Persia, and it had Zoroastrianism was the largest religion on earth during the Persian Empire, perhaps 3.5 million believers, and water is an important aspect of Zoroastrianism. So my speculation, like I said, is that due to the huge, vast flood, the water god became the most powerful of all gods. So, the oldest recorded humanity in the area was the Ubaids, ancestors of the Sumerians. Their earliest spiritual beliefs and practices seem to be a pantheon of gods, one for every need, for these superstitious and fatalistic people. I took that out of the book. Having many gods, polytheism, being chased and killed by the water god for 2 years, chased or killed, is only part of the community, where only part of the community survived, possibly led to the belief that one god was by far the most powerful. The other gods seem to be no match for this powerful God. Okay, so then we go from monotheism to Judaism to Christianity to 600 basically AD to Muslim, the Catholic, Eastern Orthodox, Protestant, various sects of Protestant. And I have a tree here about, and that was the tree, okay. And then there's religious minorities. How many religions that people attend to and go to like church or meetings, how many do you think there are in the world right now? Any ideas? I heard 500. Any other numbers? Thousands. Okay. I looked up number of religions in the world with Google. Best estimate is 4,200 different religious belief systems.
Who counted those? Who counted those?
I did not.
I mean, is it possible that there's some out
Mr.
there that
Mr.
they don't
Google.
even know
Mr.
about it?
Google was out there counting them all up.
You're counting monotheism.
Every kind of religion. Yeah, every kind. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, this is, okay, we went through that. So there's, anyway, much, as I said, much of this latter part about the development of monotheism, even though we know it as a fact that comes from the Middle East, much of the rest of it is by speculation as to how it came about to be in the Middle East due to the flood. And the concept of Atlantis is my speculation based on my research. And if we have time, which we can go into the Atlantis part more. But anyway, with religion, events and things in nature sometimes helpful, sometimes harmful, right? People have assigned gods to these events and things over time. Then, if the gods, then maybe people can influence the gods like they influence other people to bend future events to their wishes by making sacrifices or doing good. What do you have to do to your God to try and get something you want? Birthday present, or better life, or not have cancer, or whatever. There's things that you might think of going to church more, or probably not making a sacrificial lamb on the altar or something, but you may make a promise to yourself to do something different. These are all things that you do to try and influence the future. And your God is the only way, unless you have some scientific method, to go and try and influence your future. Okay. If one does the right things or makes the right offerings, there's a belief that they can appease or please the gods to benefit their future. And so what is God to you? And what did the oldest peoples think about life, and why did they invent God or gods? So does anybody have any comments about yes?
George, I have the belief that they can appease. I'm not sure they believe that. I'm sure that they hoped that they could change that just as we all do, if we do what we think is the right thing, we hope that will do. I think it's the concept of hope rather than, I don't know whether they have an actual documentation for the fact that if they believe this, it's going to be. I wonder about that.
That's a good wonder. If you want something, you can say, I want it, and if you have mommy there and you're young, and you demand enough and pound you or misbehave, you may get it. Well, you may get kicked out. Depends on your body.
Smack.
But the idea of wanting something puts that thought out there that sometime in the future, hopefully right away, but maybe later, it'll come about. And one of the things I didn't mention, Tony and I are both dowsers. And dowsing is not just water witching, it's using dowsing techniques to learn information about something you don't know anything about. And in dowsing, you get an answer. It's either right or it's wrong. And it's really easy to know if you test it, and if you're willing to go and subject your dowsing to facts and somebody else checking you. Is the water 100 feet down and 20 gallons a minute, or is it not? It's easy to check. Are the keys in the bottom right-hand drawer where you thought they were going to be, where you told this other person who asked you the question as a dowser? They're either there or they're not there. It's easy to find out.
Is it all about finding things, though? Finding physical objects?
Dowsing is usually, yes,
I
finding,
mean, if you're not asking it a philosophical question.
no. Is that right, Tony? I think that's right.
It's not so much a philosophy as a reality, yes.
Yeah, but it is based on trying to find something.
Well, it can be about finding things, it can be about connecting with what is. Okay, so the water is.
Something in real life that
Yeah.
exists and you're
Right.
looking for. Okay, okay, thank you.
What?
It's concrete.
It's,
It's not not answering philosophical questions.
yeah, that's right. Yes. No, it was a good question. It is specific things that can be known.
So if you lose your car keys, that's a good way to approach it, trying to find them.
Yeah. Well, okay. We have a few minutes. Book group we're in, guy lost his keys somewhere between where the group was and his house. He asked me, emailed me and said, could I tell him where his keys were? And I thought about it. Well, I was out cutting wood. I sat down and took a break. And I said, well, maybe I'll try and answer that question. So I did binary dowsing. It's this way. A binary systems. You put your thumb and forefinger together and you pull your hands apart. Either these fingers separate or these fingers separate. You can assign answers to one of those two phenomena. This could be yes, this could be no. I said yes and no. So I asked the question, are the keys in the house where the book group was? I got no. Are the keys between the book group house and his car? No. Are the keys in the car? No. Are the keys between the car and his house? Yes. Are the keys in his house? No. So I wrote back and I said, I think your keys are, no, it was your glasses. It was his glasses. And I said, I think they're between the car and your house. And he said, went back and looked, it was snowing. He said, I can't see them anywhere. So 4 days later, this was the spring, 4 days later, I get an email back and says, I found them. I saw a glint, and they were right where you said they were, between the house. He got out of the car, and he turned around, started walking, they fell out of his pocket or whatever, and they were in the snow. So how did I know that? Okay, you got the chance of the house, between the house and the car, there's a 5-way chance, and I picked the right one. Accident, statistical probability, or what? But it was right. So how does this work? The only way that I know that dowsing could work is a wormhole connection between here now and then there. In other words, we are physically right here. Our time period is right now. Later on, we will be, or he will be, then there. So maybe there's a connection that a dowser can connect between here now and there. Okay, so anyone comments about monotheism?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm thinking here. You know what else is interesting? That benefit their future phrase. Because I remember there were a lot of times where I, and we must all have done that, prayed for a certain thing,
Yep.
and we didn't get it. And I always got the explanation, well, maybe that wasn't the best thing for you.
Right. You're
Okay,
second guessing
maybe
yourself.
God, in His wisdom, knew
That was
that
not good
if
for
you
you.
got that. So, that benefit their future is a all-inclusive phrase, which
Yeah.
is really important there.
Very. Right. Okay. So we've gone through the religious movements and the questions and answers. Now then,
I have a question about the flood.
yes.
You seem to be concentrating on the Black Sea, but how about the Mediterranean?
The Mediterranean was flooded also,
Yes.
according to their core samples, but a lot earlier.
Yeah, there's a theory that Atlantis, which was supposedly, allegedly, the first Garden of Eden, went under
Right,
during that flood of the Mediterranean Sea.
right.
Could there be several different versions that somehow merged into one as the centuries or whatever it might be?
Versions of,
Versions of
Flooding,
the flood
Of
and
flooding?
Atlantis and so forth.
different flooding merging into one idea.
The stories
Right.
could have merged into one central story after many, 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 many.
right. It's possible. Where did I put my Atlantis stuff? In the back there. Tony, do you remember my stuff? The only reference we have to Atlantis, like I said, is this Greek Plato who recalled Criticus telling the story. And I was actually able to get an exact as possible translation of Criticus' words. And I have that right here. Anyway, there's very specific size for this island of Atlantis. There's very specific character of the people who lived in Atlantis. And there's also talk about their gods, and there are many gods and whatnot. I don't know, it's not right there.
Have archaeologists done
Many questions.
What?
I was wondering if archaeologists have found many things around that exposed island.
Nobody knows to look there yet.
Oh,
You are the first in the world, except for me. You are the very first to ever hear of this concept. What?
You'll have to tell them about it.
Did you find it? Okay, thank you. It's wonderful to have a good wife. It really is. That's fine. Okay. Okay. A flood myth or deluge. This is from Wikipedia. Okay. Believe it or not. A flood myth or deluge myth is a narrative in which a great flood, usually sent by a deity or deities, destroys civilization. Often an act of divine retribution. So if you weren't good, you could get a flood. Parallels are often drawn between flood waters and those of myths, and the primeval waters found in certain creation myths, as the flood waters are described as a measure for the cleansing of humanity in preparation for rebirth. Most flood myths also contain a culture hero who represents the human craving for life. Oh, anyway.
There are many religious things things that came about because of this, and that had
Right.
as a core of their religion.
Okay, so this is Criticus. Critias. Critias. Now I'm going to have to put my glasses on because the words are small. Yeah, maybe later. We don't even need this anymore. Okay. The Critias is a fragment which breaks off in the middle of a sentence. It was designed to be the second part of a trilogy, which, like the other great Platonic trilogy of the sophist, statesman, philosopher, was never completed. Okay. Critias returns to a story professing only to repeat what Solon was told by the priests. And these, Solon contacted Egyptian priests, and that the story of Atlantis went to Egypt and then came to Greece through Critias. Critias returns to a story professing only to repeat what Solon was told by the priests, the war of which he was about to speak had occurred 9,000 years ago. Just timing, 9,000 years from 0 BC, or 0 AD BC, roughly, is just after, as the glaciers were melting. The beginning, probably, of the Atlantis community. Like I was showing you there, that area, that big area, was, did I show you the size of it? Okay. Okay. Anyway. The gods were given different portions of the earth. Poseidon obtained as his portion the island of Atlantis. And there he begot children whose mother was immortal. Towards the sea, and in the center of an island, there was a very fair and fertile plain. And near the center, about 50 stadia from the plain, there was a low mountain in which dwelt a man named Evenor, and his wife Leucippe, and the daughter Cleito, of whom Poseidon became enamored. He, to secure his love, enclosed the mountain with rings and zones varying in size of land, 2 of land and 3 of sea, which is divine power. And he was able to do this because he was God. There was no shipping in those days. No man could get to this place by water. To the interior island, he conveyed under the earth springs hot water, and cold water. So, what do I have? Let's go backwards. Okay. This water, like I said, the water level could have come up 550 feet, or 500 feet. But the height of the land right now below sea level, below Black Sea level, is a maximum of around 200 to 300 feet. So this would have been a big plain at that time before the flood. And then this would have been the freshwater ocean this way, freshwater lake. So this goes way down to 1.5 miles. And you have the estuary from the Danube. This whole thing is a delta formed by the water coming out from the Danube. Okay. The depths received streams which came down from the mountains as well as canals in the interior and found a way to the sea. So the mountains that are over to the left, if I go way back, you can see the whole area. Yeah, there's the mountains over to the east, and to the west, as well as canals in the interior. This is a big flat plain, but also the water coming out is a plain, but also there were canal ditches along there. The plain around the city was highly cultivated and sheltered from the north by mountains. Was oblong, it's oblong, and where falling out of the straight line followed a circular ditch which was of an incredible depth. This depth received the streams which came down from the mountains as well as the canals of the interior, found a way to the sea. The entire country was divided into 60,000 lots, each of which was a square of 10 stadia. Okay, so if you multiply that out, this area is around 1,000 miles long and around 75 miles wide down in here, and wider up that way. So that area pretty much compares with what the Greek story of Atlantis says it was. It goes into a lot of stuff, how much the kings all had to contribute and the gods and this and that. It says that fell out of favor and the Atlantis sunk by an earthquake, became a impassable barrier of mud to the voyagers and whatnot. So it's a fairly long dialogue, but it's well in here, okay. It was a smooth and even oblong shape extending in one direction 3,000 stadia, which is around 750 miles, and 2,000 stadia wide, which is around 240 miles wide. So it's sort of comparable to this area. Okay. Such was the vast power of the gods which settled in the lost island of Atlantis, and thus he afterwards directed against our land for the following reasons, as tradition tells. This is Greek talking. For many generations, as long as the divine nature lasted in them, they were obedient to the laws and well affection towards the god. This is Poseidon, whose speed they were, for they were possessed true, and in every way great spirits, uniting gentleness and wisdom in the various chances of life, and in their intercourse with one another. They despised everything but virtue, caring little for their present state of life, and thinking lightly of the possession of gold and other property. In other words, the people were very Christian, I would say. Or, of course, didn't come along yet, but those same beliefs and attitudes and the way you treat each other, which seemed only, they despised gold and other property, which seemed only a burden to them. Neither were they intoxicated by the luxury of these goods. And it didn't increase the nor did wealth deprive them of their self-control, but they were sober and saw clearly that all these goods are increased by virtue and friendship with one another, whereas by too great regard and respect for them, they are lost in friendships with them. By such reflections and by the continuance in them of a divine nature, the qualities which we have described grew and increased among them. But when the divine proportion began to fade away and became diluted too often and too much with the mortal admixture, and the human nature got the upper hand, then they, being unable to bear their fortune, behaved unseemly, and to him who had an eye to see grew visibly debased. For they were losing the fairest of their precious gifts. But to those who had no eye to see the true happiness, they appeared glorious and blessed at the very time when they were full of avarice and unrighteous power. Zeus, the god of gods, who rules according to law and is able to see into such things, perceived that an honorable race was in a woeful plight, and wanting to inflict punishment on them, that they might be chastened and improved, collected all the gods into their most holy habitation, which being placed in the center of the world, beholds all the created things, and when he had called them all together, he spoke as follows. Flood.
Where are you reading that from?
This is the Greek. I'm not reading Greek, but I'm reading English.
It's translation of the Greek.
Of Plato.
Plato's dialogue.
This is,
Plato's.
yeah.
Oh,
It's
okay.
Critias.
There's a copy of it here if you want to come up.
Yeah, come together.
I think,
As long as-
George, can we continue the conversation over the refreshments?
Sure.
And thank you very much
And if
for
anybody, I mean,
talking to us about your thoughts on these things. It's always interesting to hear a
Yeah.
new perspective on some of
Well,
the stories that we know. So please stay and help yourself to the refreshments.
I'm kind of an inventor. I've never made any money inventing, but I've invented
A
several
lot of ideas.
things. Well, no, I invented the rotary lawnmower. I invented lightweight armor.
Yes, you was very. Thank you so much for being here, everyone, and please come again.